The death of inmate Harris be termed as followed. Exceptionally cleared. They were exceptionally cleared. And the inmates in the dorm told them they put the canister of chemical agents in this man's mouth.
Yeah. Stop playing with me. Yeah. Stop playing with me. Yeah. Y'all niggas know this with me, nigga. Yeah. You heard what I said? Stop playing with me. Y'all better. Acting like they open when young, whatever. You know that we open when young, you know better. And you know the real is back. Who better? Get them young. Thank the Lord, man. They find a free mother get slick.
Welcome to the Criminal Podcast, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your host, Moliere, Dimanche. In this episode, we'll be dealing with yet another mysterious death in the Florida prison systems. This time, we're going to be talking about inmate Ruben Harris. He was murdered at Holmes Correctional Institution in Bonifay, Florida. Now, I've been there. I've been looking at a lot of these Inspector General reports, and I've been looking at the institutions that these inmates have been dying at. You know, I've been going over a lot of these files. And ironically, I've been to all of them. In the 10 years that I was sentenced to in the Florida Department of Corrections, I bounced around to so many prisons. And, you know, part of the reason they were bouncing me around all the time was because, you know, I was exposing what they were doing to the inmates. So in Bonifay, what I found was most unusual that set Bonifay apart from all of the other prisons that I went to was the fact that, you know, it's well known that members of the Ku Klux Klan are not only correctional officers, they're in the law enforcement. Some of them have served in the American Congress. That's nothing new. What surprised me about Bonifay was that they didn't hide it at all. At Holmes Correctional Institution, they actually introduce you to the institution that way. You know, every prison has their little speech about, you know, how you're not in Kansas anymore and what they're all about and this and that. And Holmes, every staff member, just about, I say with the exception of maybe 3 of them, were members of the Ku Klux Klan. And they told us this. There was a grand wizard on the compound. And these folks were not shy about telling us any of this stuff. I was surprised because it's like, man, you know, this could cause some real problems for y'all. Y'all telling us y'all in the KKK. Y'all telling us this sergeant's a grand wizard in the Ku Klux Klan. And, you know, this, you'd swear it was just legal. So, another thing that they used to inform us about at Holmes Correctional Institution was a thing called a monkey nut. Monkey nuts. And, you know, they were these little ropes tied into little knots that they used to wear on their wrists and, you know, on their keychains and all of that. And we found out that the monkey nuts supposedly represented a dead black man. Imagine that. A monkey nut. Any black man that this holder of these monkey nuts has, it symbolizes the death of a black man. And you have folks with knots and knots and knots and knots and knots and knots just hanging out of their pocket. Monkey nuts. Like they're flaunting the fact that they're killing black people consistently and getting away with it, with murder. So, that camp was like being thrown back in the day, but inmate Ruben Harris died in F1 dormitory at Holmes Correctional Institution. Now, according to the Inspector General's report, which is just like any other one, there's all of these redactions. And these redactions, I don't even understand why they do it. You know, they leave enough information in these reports for us to know how the inmate died, but it seems like the stuff that they're redacting is stuff that would show you directly who's responsible. Now, in my book, It Takes a Criminal to Know One, I name names, specific officers who were supposedly known killers, known murderers of inmates. And while there's no specific officer listed in this report, I guarantee you, the murderer that I named in my book, I can guarantee you, if he didn't directly commit this one, and this one was dreadful, if he didn't directly commit this murder, he had something to do with it. So according to this report, inmate Ruben Harris was high on K2. Now, the K2 epidemic is something that's been taking the prison system by storm. It has no ceiling. You know, I used to see these guys, they smoke this K2 and get completely naked and run around the compound biting people. You know, it was serious like that. And then they start banging their heads up against the cell bars until they cut their faces open, bleeding, screaming for Jesus to save them, and that they see demons. Like, the K2 epidemic is serious. So if he was really high on that, I can see him freaking out and them having to restrain him. However, they put a canister of tear gas in his mouth and blasted him. A can of tear gas. Now, let me tell you about the MK9 dispenser. This is a big dispenser of chemical agents that these COs wear on their hips. And it's supposed to be for riot control. Like, if a group of guys have a gang fight out on a rec yard, or a bunch of us start fighting in the chow hall or the dorm or something, they're gonna pull out this MK9, and just a little bit from that can is gonna straighten everybody out. It ain't no fighting anymore. Nobody's gonna be fighting. The riot's gonna stop. That stuff is serious business. And if it can stop 10, 20, 30 men just by using a little bit of the can, imagine what happens when somebody puts that canister in your mouth and blast the trigger. You got lungs full of tear gas on the spot. You're gonna die instantly. Please believe it. People have died in these prison cells with them tear gas and these inmates. The next one that we go over is gonna be an inmate who died like that in a confinement cell at Franklin CI. But I mean, if that's enough to kill a man in an open area, what do you think is gonna happen when you put it in his mouth? So, according to the report, it says video surveillance was obtained from the blank dormitory. They redacted out the letters of the dormitory, and from a handheld camera that was activated by correctional officers once inmate Harris was placed in the decontamination shower. Resident agent in charge, Troy Roper, conducted a preliminary review of the video surveillance and discovered that the use of force incident was not in view of the video cameras. So they went and pulled video surveillance from 2 dormitories that didn't have anything to do with it. That's like an incident. Somebody breaks into your house, they burglarize your house, and they go pull cameras from up and down the streets just to say that they pulled some cameras. Didn't record anything. So the investigators note the reactionary use of force and physical force involving inmate Harris was documented in IG case 17-17272. On September 25th, an autopsy was conducted on inmate Harris by Dr. J. Radke, medical examiner in the 14th Judicial Circuit. Dr. Radke ruled inmate Harris's death was accidental and redactions to the end. So the coroner says that this whole thing was an accident, right? So the rest of this is just saying how they reviewed the surveillance footage to see if they could see anything, even though they're from different dormitories. But what was most unusual about this is the senior inspector's notes, Inspector Louis Cordova. Cordova reviewed the investigation completed by FDLE, and there were no administrative issues found. There were inmates who were interviewed during the course of this investigation who did allege excessive force was used by staff in trying to subdue inmate Harris. Specifically, it was alleged that chemical agents were sprayed directly into Harris's mouth. This use of force incident is currently being reviewed by the Office of the Inspector General Use of Force Unit, and a determination will be made if staff used excessive force and whether there were violations of procedure found. Then in the conclusion, it says, based on the information gathered, Special Agent Diana Chase's investigation, it is recommended of Inspector Louis Cordova that the death of inmate Harris be termed as followed. Exceptionally cleared. They were exceptionally cleared. And the inmates in the dorm told them they put the canister of chemical agents in this man's mouth and sprayed him. So you have to ask yourself, what are these state attorneys doing? If you have witnesses to a crime, I guarantee you, if you and I went out and did anything wrong, anybody in the area is going to be interviewed and they're going to be asked questions about everything we did. They're going to be called to testify in court and say whatever they witnessed, right? How come none of those inmates who saw these officers or that officer or that sergeant put this canister of chemical agents in this man's mouth, how come none of them were called to be witnesses in a criminal prosecution? Why was the staff exceptionally cleared? You weren't just cleared, you were exceptionally cleared. That means you got away with murder and don't ever have to worry about this. Exceptionally cleared. The coroner, what was the coroner thinking? There's traces of chemical agents in the man's mouth. That wasn't even in the report, whether he tested for it or not. Had a thorough investigation been conducted, the first thing they should have did was got that can of chemical agents. They should have tested the tip and seen, they should have did a DNA test on the canister to see if this inmate's saliva was on that canister of chemical agents. Then ask the question, how the hell did that happen? Why is this inmate's saliva on the tip of a can of chemical agents? And why was this done in a dormitory full of other people? You spray that stuff one time, you just tap it one time in the air, everybody around you is gonna feel the effects instantly. I've seen enough of this to know, I've smelled enough of it, I've been tear gassed. It's deadly. And they put it in this man's mouth. So with the staff member, with the murderers being exceptionally cleared, guess what that means? That man's family doesn't even know about those allegations, because guess what? You think they allowed those inmates, how in the world could those inmates who witnessed this get in contact with that man's family and say they put the tear gas in your father's mouth or in your son's mouth or in your husband's mouth and blasted him? That's how he died. And then their cousin at the medical examiner's office is gonna say, oh, no, it was an accident. How? They accidentally shoved the damn tear gas canister down the man's throat? That was the accident? Most families don't even know where to start as far as procuring Inspector General affidavits or case files or anything like that. They ain't read none of that. They still have questions. The guards just told the family, oh, he smoked some K2 and had an episode and he had a heart attack. However the medical examiner wrote it up, it coincided, and that's what the family was told. They buried that man, cremated him, whatever they did, never got any answers. But in the Inspector General's report, they say they put it in there's no training that ever requires officers to put that in any human's mouth. It's tear gas. That's the new noose of the 21st century. That's that's how Jim Crow is being preserved in the United States of America. Oleorescent capsicum orthochlorobenzylidine melanonitrate, all these different forms of tear gas is how correctional officers, that's their new way of lynching people in the 21st century. So if you throwing rocks at the chain gang and going to prison is on your mind and you looking forward to wearing a uniform like this, a pair of these blues, which I stole when I EOS because, you know, I'm not gonna forget it. I wore these, I paid for these from the laundromat when I was up the road, and I took it with me because it reminds me every day of where I've been and where I'm not going back to, ever. And if you think you look good in one of these, and you're not gonna get a button up, this was exclusive, this old school. If you think you're ready for this, man, just familiarize yourself with what they call Black Jesus in the chain gang. Black Jesus is the name for the tear gas because it come in a big black can and it will have the toughest men screaming for Jesus. So if you think you're ready for that, get familiar with Black Jesus because it will kill you. So Ruben Harris, ladies and gentlemen, another one swept under the rug, but I'm here to shine some light on it. Let me know your thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe, like, comment. If you have a relative out there you want me to shed some light on their situation, send me their name, DC number. I will obtain the appropriate records and I will put the spotlight on it. They know me very well within Florida government, period. They know I'm a fearless speaker of the truth. And I'm about all them problems. So we can go ahead and put it all out there. Don't forget to like and subscribe. If you don't have your copy of It Takes a Criminal to Know One, you are not serious about anything on this channel. And I suggest that if you want to wisen up the right way, get that, study it, get familiar with it so you understand what I'm talking about and you understand what needs to be done. Because there's a way you fight the system. There's a way to win. It's not all hopeless when you have the right knowledge. So with that, everybody, I'm signing off. Get ready for the next one because there's thousands and thousands of deaths that we're going to bring to the spotlight. See you next time.